This week in Idaho and across the nation, Republicans dominate. Prop 1 fails completely, Idaho passes an amendment to our Constitution, plus record turnout at the polls and so much more. This is the local Yocal Idaho Midweek report, where we give you a quick overview of the news in Idaho for the last week. And speaking of something that happened last week, sorry for the delay on getting this episode out to you. As you can tell, my voice is recovered. It's not quite there, but it's well enough now I can record and get this message out to you. So we'll continue through the script here, but just bear with me and my voice sounds off for all you audio-only listeners out there. Something really exciting that happened last week and that kept me up to 1 a.m. The 2024 election results are in, and Trump is the 47th president of the United States of America. If you know this channel, you probably know I'm quite excited. But with that said, there were also several nail-biting races that have reshaped Idaho's political landscape. If we bring it back to Idaho, there are a few races that were a bit of a nail-biters that really reshaped Idaho's political landscapes, and I want to look at those right now. The first one, and the biggest one that's been talked about if you've kept up in the news, is District 15, Cody's Galloway's race. She secured the victory on that, flipping a traditionally Democrat seat back to a Republican-controlled one, a seat that had been red since 1992 until it turned blue. In the same district, Democrat incumbent Steve Birch barely held his House seat, so it's very interesting to see how that's playing out, winning by a mere 1% margin against Republican challenger Annette Tipton. District 26 saw its own drama unfold, with Democrat Senator Ron Taylor narrowly retaining his seat, so a lot of challenging races for Democrats, defeating Republican Lori Likely by just 367 votes. My goodness, a bunch of close ones there. But in conclusion, looking at the overall results of the 2024 election for Idaho, the Republican wave continued across the state, resulting in a commanding 30-5 Senate supermajority and a 60-9 House supermajority as well. This election marks a historic shift, as for the first time in 4 decades, Blaine County will not have a Democrat representative in the legislature. And continuing with that winning streak, the GOP's success extends to District 6 near Moscow, District 29 in Pocatello area, and multiple other regions, significantly strengthening conservative influence in Idaho politics. It will be very encouraging to see what will happen with that with the upcoming 2025 legislative session. One of the areas we talked about a little bit with Cody Galloway is the Treasure Valley. On Tuesday's election results showcased a significant conservative victory across the Treasure Valley as well, not only just the state, with Republican incumbents securing decisive wins in both Ada and Canyon County. First, looking at Ada County, because it's one of the more mixed districts, Tom Daly retained his position as the county commissioner with a commanding 59.2% of the vote, while fellow Republican Commissioner Ryan Davidson secured his seat with 58.1%, so not a massive margin, but still a margin to win. Sheriff Matt Clifford won re-election with an overwhelming 76.2% of the vote. My goodness, congratulations, sir. Maintaining strong conservative leadership in law enforcement, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then also going over to Canyon County, which is known for its conservative positions as well, included the approval of a new auditorium district in Nampa that passed with a 61.1% support. This new district will help maintain and improve venues like the Ford Idaho Center and the Nampa Civic Center, if you've ever been there for different events or conferences, while reducing the property tax burden on local residents. That'll be interesting to see. However, Canyon County voters rejected the ambulance district levy with a 53.5% vote against the $5.8 million proposal. But in conclusion, looking at the Treasure Valley as a whole, the results do demonstrate a continued trust in conservative leadership, particularly notable in Ada County, with certain key positions being flipped to more conservative candidates, which this is historical, being the fact that Republicans, it's been rather challenging for them to win in Ada County. Election cycle also saw Republicans gain ground in the state legislature, as we've talked about. Keeley with that race with Cody Galloway winning in District 15 for Senate race, further strengthening the conservative representation in the region, which is super encouraging to see. And like I've said, it'll be interesting to see how this happens into the 2025 session. And as you can probably guess, most of our first segment of stories are going to be about the election stuff, but the other massive one that was on the ballot that didn't have anything to do with any elected representative but more was a Proposition 1 and a resounding victory for election integrity was rejected overwhelmingly by voters, particularly which would have implemented a ranked choice voting and top 4 primary system. Plus Idaho's constitutional amendment that also passed with a landslide. Looking at Prop 1, the measure failed by a decisive margin, with nearly 70% of voters opposing the change. The defeat of Prop 1 demonstrates Idahoans' commitment to maintaining clear, straightforward elections, which is very encouraging to see. But if we go to the other side of the election coin, Idaho's constitutional amendment, voters strongly supported the amendment ensuring only U.S. citizens can vote in Idaho's elections, passing by a slightly smaller margin, but still a major one, at 64.9% approval. Governor Brad Little affirmed the results, emphasizing that his priority remains ensuring Idahoans have trust and confidence in their election system. Tying that all together with a bow, this decisive outcome preserves Idaho's time-tested election process and reinforces our state's dedication to transparent voting methods, which it will be interesting to see as we go into our next primary or future elections how these added measures will help. And with all of that, we've looked at the major key parts of the 2024 election here in Idaho, but part of that happens based on people's turnout. And Idaho made history on that this last week with an unprecedented voter turnout for the 2024 general election. A remarkable 85.7% of registered voters cast their ballots, totaling nearly 917,000 votes statewide. This shattered previous records, far surpassing the 878,000 votes cast in 2020. Several counties demonstrated exceptional civic engagement, which just means voting, with Minidoka County leading at 86.8% turnout. That is just crazy. Followed by Butte and Jefferson counties, both achieving 93.8% voter turnout. The surge in participation wasn't limited to Election Day. Early voting numbers had already exceeded May's primary election totals before November 5th. But overall, this historic turnout reflects our state's growing population, probably, increased political engagement, which that has only happened more and more after COVID. I think you can all attest to that. And the historic nature of this year's election, specifically with one candidate being shot at. That's not a common thing to have on the ballot. County Clerk Rick Hogelboom noted that this milestone wasn't just about the percentages, but also raw numbers. He contributed to part of Idaho's significant population growth. This record-setting participation demonstrates Idahoans' commitments to having their voices heard in shaping our state's future, which is very encouraging here, and we thank you very much for being involved in the political process. Which, if you've liked that overview of the elections that happened last week, do us a favor and hit the like button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. Helps us reach more folks who love Idaho just like you. And getting back to more local Idahoan things, but we had to cover the election stuff there, so a big deal. The Brian Kohberger case continues to unfold as his defense team appeared in Ada County Court to argue motions related to the death penalty, because we have that in here in Idaho. It's an encouraging thing. Kohberger, who's charged with the murder of the University of Idaho students in November of 2022, crazy to realize that's 2, maybe 3 years now in the rear, is scheduled for trial in August of 2025. His defense team is working to remove the death penalty from consideration, citing concerns about Idaho's execution methods and constitutional issues. So they're going for a more broad and fundamental view. But adding some general context to this, Judge Stephen Hippler addressed several key points, including allowing Kohberger to wear street clothes in the future hearings. The defense argued that Idaho's current inability to properly execute its inmates is dehumanizing, end quote, on the basis that they just have a hard time of getting it, though Judge Hippler noted that both legal injection and the firing squad remain legal options. He also reminded that the court that any potential execution would be years away, because it takes forever and it gets mired in the muck. But moving forward, the hearing covered multiple motions, including arguments about the death penalty qualified juries and constitutional rights. The prosecution maintains that previously established legal precedent supports their position on the ground of capital punishment. And speaking of legal things, Attorney General Rao Labrador has secured a significant legal victory against the Biden administration's federal contractor minimum wage policy. What, you might ask, that is, I did not know until I heard about this win. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Idaho and 3 other states, so look, we work together with people, see? Determining that President Biden exceeded his authority by imposing a $15 minimum wage on federal contractors. The policy, which affects roughly 1/5 of the U.S. workforce, rather large, was deemed unlawful by the court. This marks the first federal appeals court case to invalidate the federal contractor minimum wage mandate. Getting a takeaway from this and what this means overall, with also a bit of a broader context there, the ruling represents a crucial precedent in limiting executive authority over wage regulations, as the court affirmed that such powers belonged exclusively to Congress under the Constitution, which is always encouraging to see when the power is given back to Congress and not the executive orders. And speaking of the legislator, Idaho's Legislative Task Force has begun examining diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across state and college universities. Another chapter in an ongoing debate over DEI in higher education and lower education here in the state of Idaho, particularly with the task force. The 8-member committee, co-chaired by Senate Todd Lakely of Nampa and Representative Judy Boyle of Midvale, held its inaugural 90-minute meeting to assess these programs present in Idaho's campuses. This investigation follows recent state actions, which we've talked about ad nauseum, mainly bans on using taxpayer dollars for DEI programs and prohibiting diversity statements in higher education hiring. We have talked about that. You should go check out our Idaho Bill breakdowns on that. Wink. The task force primary focus includes reviewing current DEI-related courses and degree requirements at the university institutions like Boise State University or other big universities here in the state. But moving forward with this broader context, while strong conservatives express concern about DEI's impact on campus culture, others caution against potential censorship, which is something we do need to be careful for and kind of balance back from. The committee plans to continue its work through December, with potential legislation emerging for the 2025 session. I would argue maybe not potential, but guaranteed at this point. And speaking of universities and something that I don't keep up with enough, the Boise State Broncos continued their impressive run in college football, remaining undefeated in the Mountain West Conference play after a commanding 56-24 victory over San Diego State. Currently ranked 12th in the nation, our Broncos have shown why they're considered one of the best teams outside the major conference. Now, particularly looking at the reasons for their success, leading the charge is the star running back Ashton Gentney, who tops the nation in running yards. Head coach Spencer Daleson has kept the team focused, pushing them to improve week after week. Broncos' success has put them on a track for something special. Particularly, they are now in the position to potentially qualify for the expanded 12-team college football playoff. Now, moving forward with all of that, with this momentum, Boise State stands out as the clear favorite to win the Mountain West Conference Championship. Their remaining schedule looks favorable if they continue to dominate their performances, as of recording this. Who knows, we might even see the Broncos make history in the national playoff picture. Which, if you're excited about how the Broncos are doing, or if you just want to share some of these stories with friends and family, don't hesitate to share it. Your shares can help us spread the word about our beautiful state. Now, staying in the Treasure Valley, the home of the Boise State Broncos, and something that you may have actually had after a Boise State game if you've gone to some of them. Need to add that on my list of things to do. The beloved local restaurant Goodwood Barbecue is expanding its footprint by purchasing the former Flats 16 Event Center on Highway 16 in Eagle. Owners Stephen and Bobby Cooper celebrated their 25th year in business. Congratulations! Their plan is to transform the 5-acre property into a multi-use destination. Development will feature 2 new restaurant concepts, the first being the Woodhouse Craft Kitchen, offering breakfast and lunch, and then the second being an upscale dinner house that will elevate the Goodwood concept to its fullest extent. Yummy, yummy barbecue. The property, complete with a pond and waterfall and creek, will also include retail spaces for local vendors and hosts and community events, so should be rather interesting. Construction for it is set to begin on spring of 2025, with the Woodhouse Craft Kitchen aiming to open by late summer. The expansion coincides with the development of a new 94-house neighborhood surrounding the property, so that'll be fairly good for anybody that lives there. If you're a lover of barbecue, or just the smell of it, or just generally eating it, might consider buying a property there. Wink. And staying in Boise, but flipping from the meat side of things to the vegetarian or environmental side, the Ada County Jail expansion faces another unexpected hurdle as the Boise Planning and Zoning Commission halted approval over, drumroll please for this, electric vehicle parking requirements. Yes, we're going to stall things on a thing because of electric vehicles. The city demands approximately 130 EV-compatible parking spots to meet code. Oh boy, that's Lauren McLean right there. A requirement that would cost taxpayers roughly $1.5 million. Specifically, the county architect argues these funds would be better spent on inmate housing rather than potentially unused EV infrastructure. He might have a point there. Wink. This dispute affects Phase 1 of the expansion plan, which includes kitchen remodeling and site improvements. The project became necessary as the jail, built in the 1970s when the county's population was only 110,000, now serves nearly 560,000 residents. While the county has about $2 million set aside for Phase 1, the total expansion would cost around $70 million. In conclusion, the Ada County Sheriff's Office hopes to begin construction by next summer, but this timeline depends on resolving the current parking dispute and completing the design review process, which, with electric vehicles, may take a little bit more time than expected. But speaking of something that takes a bunch of diesel to process and move around, the 2024 sugar beet harvest is wrapping up across Idaho, and numbers are looking remarkably sweet. You can see what I did there. Despite a scorching summer, our farmers are reporting impressive yields up to 40 tons per acre, with sugar content reaching an astounding 18%. This puts them well above the average for the season. For perspective on the scale of this operation, Amalgamated Sugar, our grower-owned cooperative, produces about 12% of all sugar used in the United States. Let that sink in for a second. Local farmer Luke Adams, who manages about 1,600 acres of beets near Rupert, represents the dedication of our farming community, often working 15 to 16-hour days, 6 days a week during the harvest season, which, oh my goodness, that sounds crazy. Thankfully, you have AC, sir, I hope. After that's all said and done, at receiving stations like Adelaide, massive piles of beets await processing, with each ton yielding about 300 pounds of sugar, which tasty for all the holidays, right? This sugar will eventually make its way into everything from your favorite sodas like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, other sports drinks, to chocolate bars and cake mixes, many of those that you are very familiar with for the holiday season as we go into Thanksgiving. Tasty, tasty. And speaking of something that makes that possible for growing all those beets, Idaho is set to receive a $20.8 million water infrastructure upgrade through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Laws Clean Water and Drinking Water State Resolving Fund. Oh my goodness, that is a massive thing to say. Particularly, the package includes $12.2 million for clean water projects, $1 million for emerging containment funds, and $7.6 million for drinking water concerns. While the funding aims to help disadvantaged communities through low-interest loans and grants, some, obviously, here in Idaho are questioning whether such federal funding contributes to inflation pressures, because you're having to run the federal presses to do that. The initiative is part of a larger $50 billion, with a B, national water infrastructure investment. Mandates that the funds must support communities through non-repayable assistance. We'll have to see where that goes, but in conclusion, for Idaho, as it faces various water system challenges, this federal-state fund partnership offers resources for necessary upgrades, though fiscal conservatives, which there are many of those here in the state of Idaho, are a little bit wary about this and would suggest that local solutions might provide more efficient alternatives rather than a big federal bailout. Which, if you don't want to miss out learning more about Idaho, or just really enjoyed the Midweek Report and want to have this more regularly in your life, please make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content. And staying over in eastern Idaho, but also just a little bit more broadly across the state, Intermountain Packing in Idaho Falls faces some serious allegations from 3 dairy companies, claiming that processors failed to pay over $2 million for livestock deliveries. Specifically, the lawsuit filed by the dairies from Twin Falls and Washington State accused the company and its CEO, David Adams, of violating the Packers and Stockyards Act between September and November of 2023. Now, for those of us that aren't as closely in the farming industry, the dairyers allege that they delivered livestock at an agreed price of between $1.03 to $1.10 per live weight pound, but never received payment. When confronted, Adams allegedly issued post-dated checks that were later stopped for payment. But moving forward, the company claims that they have suffered financial and reputational damage, demanding compensation damages and legal fees because of all this. It'll be interesting to see what happens over there in that whole dynamic. And being over there in eastern Idaho and switching a little bit also to food, Rexburg's dining scene is about to get more diverse, don't get triggered by that word, with the opening of the Masala Indian Cuisine on November 15th, which already happened in the past tense because this script is a little old, taking over the former New Fong's location on the South 2nd West. Owners Jadid and Brittany Gill are bringing authentic North Indian cuisine to the community. Mr. Jadid brings 11 years of restaurant experience from his previous venture, Masala Bites in Virginia Beach. The restaurant promises a fine dining experience with a focus on fresh, homemade dishes, because that's all the rage and I don't blame him there, I rather like home cooking anyways, including house-made paneer and yogurt. Health-conscious diners will appreciate their commitment to organic ingredients and accommodations for various dietary restrictions, including gluten-free, vegetarian, and vegan options, so you've got the whole thing there. And coming back to the Treasure Valley for our second to last story here, a magnificent 50-foot Colorado blue spruce has found a new purpose as Nampa's community Christmas tree, thanks to the generous donation from Jim and Susan Gramco. The half-century-old tree, weighing an impressive 12,200 pounds, made its 1.5-mile journey to the Nampa train depot this last week. For over 3 decades, the Gramco's daughter dreamed of decorating this towering spruce, occasionally sneaking some ornaments into the lower branches, which if you've ever had any evergreen on your property and a young child, they usually want to do that around Christmas, especially when it snows. Now, the entire community will enjoy its holiday splendor. City crews are carefully repairing any transit damage using baling wires, screws, and lag bolts, which those are actually cool if you don't know about them, to restore the tree to its full glory. The official lighting ceremony will take place the Saturday after Thanksgiving. After spreading the holiday cheer, the tree will continue serving the community as mulch for the Nampa's parks. And speaking of wildlife that you usually run into when you go into the woods to get your Christmas trees, if you're more of a traditional family, a major wildlife crime investigation in Twin Falls County has resulted in 114 charges against 13 hunters. Man, that's got to be a record somewhere, including 53 felonies following an illegal hunting activities in the South Hills. The case centers around the Boise business owner Robert Zico, who faces 34 charges, including 14 felonies for illegally taking and wasting of game. The investigation revealed that the group hunted without proper tags in the Game Management Unit 54, a controlled hunting area that's only issued about 300 deer tags annually. A little bit of a mistake there. Fish and Game investigators uncovered evidence through surveillance footage, cell phone records, and social media, showing hunters taking trophy heads while leaving intact animals behind, violating Idaho's game salvage laws, which we do have those if you didn't already realize that. But moving forward, the case highlights one of the largest wildlife crimes in investigation in recent Idaho history, which it will be interesting to see how that all plays out, because it is something that we take very seriously here in Idaho with our hunting. And I also take the second part of this very seriously. I need to rest my voice, so thank you sincerely for listening to the entire report. Hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you like the Midweek Report, please make sure to check out our other content. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter by tweeting us at local Yocal Idaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now. A fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.